This episode, we discuss birth trauma and birth injury, which may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Bitching and Bolusing podcast with Courtney and Brittney. Hi guys, welcome to the Bitching and Bolusing podcast. I'm Brittney.
I'm Courtney.
And we're just two moms going about living our lives, and we happen to be raising children with disabilities. Courtney and I, we each have two kids, and our oldest children, they are both disabled.
They are. And we started this podcast just to kind of quite literally bitch and bolus. And full disclaimer right at the beginning, clearly in the name of our podcast, you can tell we do cuss a lot.
A lot.
So if you are easily offended, don't listen. Just turn us off now, because as much as I can try to curb it, I can't curb it. So
earmuffs for the little ones.
This is definitely an adult cussing podcast.
It is.
But let's jump right in here. We're just going to start with some intros. Some of you may know us from social media, particularly Instagram, where we're probably most active. And we just want to pop on this first episode with everybody just to give some insight into who we are, why we're doing this, and what we actually are doing with this podcast. So I'll go ahead and start. Again, my name is Courtney. I am a mama of two. I just turned the big 40. Not super excited about that part, but it's true. It's
40's
happened.
the new 20. It's the new
That's
20.
what they say, but I can guarantee my body disagrees, like 100%. So I am a mama of two. I am married to my best friend, and we have our oldest is Lino. He is 4. And our youngest is Luca. He is 1.5. Lino was born with a brain injury, so he is disabled. Just some backstory on that. I had a wonderful, beautiful pregnancy with Lino. It was picture perfect in the sense of what you'd expect from a pregnancy. But we had a really, really complicated labor and delivery that resulted in him being born not breathing. Interestingly enough, I honestly wasn't in labor very long, probably only about 6 hours or so before he came out naturally. And he was rushed away immediately over to NICU. He spent 14 days exactly in NICU. He did something called cooling therapy or hypothermic therapy, which is used to treat a specific brain injury called hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which happens to also be the same brain injury that Brittney's eldest, Cyrus, had as well, which is how we know each other. We met through social media. Just kind of that mutual experience of our children having the same brain injury when they were born. Lino is disabled as a result of his brain injury.
We say disabled, guys.
We use this word. We use the word disabled.
We do.
We do not use, we don't say special needs here.
No euphemisms.
Yes, no euphemism. We will try our best to be kind to those who use special needs terms. We're not trying to hate on anybody. We're truly not. But
we love you guys. We hate the term.
Yeah. We definitely have a bone to pick with the special needs term, but Lino is disabled. It does not define him. He is one hell of a kid, man. He's smart. He is funny. He is spicy.
So spicy.
The spiciest of spicies. Yeah. He is just... he's just a really awesome kiddo who just happens to have some physical disabilities and some other medical needs. He's now 4, so about 2 years ago almost, we had our other little nut job, and that is Luca.
Also spicy.
For Luke, also very spicy. He's like the ghost pepper to like Lino's jalapeno. You know? I did go with an elected C-section actually with Luca, more for my own mental sanity than like a medical reason. And Luca did come into this world very untraumatically. The comparison between the two births is really drastic, I would say. But, he's here, and he is by far the best addition to our family, is what all of our hearts needed. And, here we are now, Brittney and I just kind of taking our very similar experiences and bringing them to you guys.
Yeah, very similar. It's actually pretty creepy sometimes how
It is.
similar our lives are. Yes, very parallel, even down to like the days that we're having. I think, what was it, yesterday I texted you and I was like, are you the only one living in like this crazy life of not sleeping for the last 2 days? And you're like, yep, nope, we are going on 2 nights now of not sleeping. So
yes.
Yeah, it's like down to the days of how parallel our lives are. It's crazy. So a little bit about my backstory, also very similar to Courtney's. Cyrus was born full term, so he was 39 weeks, 4 days. I went into labor naturally at home. I labored at home for as long as I possibly could. Went to the hospital. I was 9 centimeters dilated. And they were like, okay, time to get baby out. Let's push. I think I was pushing for about maybe 3 hours. And then he was born, and unfortunately, he was born blue, and he was taken away immediately. He was intubated immediately, and it just so happened that for about an hour before delivery, he was almost completely without oxygen, and he ended up getting transferred to the NICU. And about 6 hours later, I was transferred to the hospital that the NICU's in. I delivered at a hospital that didn't have a NICU because I didn't think we would need one. Yeah, I bought into the very toxic, belief that, like, your body knows what to do, and, like, you're made for having babies. Like, women have been doing it forever. And, like, just this whole toxic mindset around, like, if I advocate for myself, and if I have a doula, and if I, like, am in a place that, like, supports my birth plan, and, like, if I'm full term, then everything will be fine. And it wasn't. And it needs to be said that just because you have a healthy pregnancy does not guarantee you will have a healthy baby. And Cyrus ended up staying in the NICU for 11 days, which is such a small amount of time, but it felt like forever. I mean, I can think back on it now and think about those 11 days and how every single hour just felt like months. I literally sit back and think about that, and I was like, we were in the NICU forever. I was like, no, it was 11 days. And same thing, he went under cooling therapy, and he was actually on cooling therapy a little bit longer than most kids because he didn't start until hour 20. So he was right at, like, that 24-hour mark to start therapy. So because of that, they ended up putting him on for an extra day of cooling. And as a result, he's disabled from it. He is same as Lino. Very spicy. Very, very sassy.
Very spicy. Oh my God.
Very spicy.
I really don't know how the amount of sass can fit into that little tiny body.
God, he is so... And it's so funny because first, a kid who I say he's non-speaking. I don't say he's non-verbal because he's very verbal. But for a kid who is non-speaking, I have never met another child as, like, sassy as Cyrus, who just has, like, just does not hold back to letting you know exactly what's going on, exactly what he thinks of you. Like, he does not need words for you to know, like, no thank you. So anyways, that's my birth story with Cyrus. I mean, that's like a synopsis of our birth story. I could go on forever with it. And so Cyrus is 4 now. He turned 4 in February. Spicy little 4-year-old. He's in school. And then we had Alden. And Alden just turned a year old, which is crazy. It flew by. So Alden is not disabled, and so I am the mother in an interabled family.
Yay!
Yeah. Yay! It's a wild ride. It's a wild ride. It's so fun and so beautiful and so scary, and there's so much uncertainty at times, and at the same time, like, there's just I don't know that I would change it for anything. I mean, there's a lot of things I would change. Like, I wouldn't change Cyrus's disability, but, like, like, I would change, like, society and acceptance and, and all that, and, but yeah, I mean, just our little family is just so wonderful.
Yeah, I always talk about it, and like I find the situation where you're interabled, there's this element of like what I call magic. It's like magical, these moments of like, I don't know, they're almost like enlightenment. You see moments differently, and the way our children interact with each other and the way they interact with the world, and how we function as a family unit. There are such beautiful moments in it, but there really is the really heavy contrast of really hard moments, a lot of struggle. There's a lot of challenges. I mean, there's no denying that.
Yeah.
So it's something that I too wouldn't change my family dynamic at all. There's a lot that I wish didn't happen in terms of Lino's injury. Of course, if there's anything I had power over, it would be to reverse that. Like,
yeah,
nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But when you're on this journey and you hit you hit a point of acceptance, or at least the goal is to hit acceptance, right? Because I don't want to say that everybody hits that point, because I think that's unrealistic, but
right.
That's certainly everybody's goal in their situation. If you're in a similar situation as and you have a disabled child, you want to get to the point of acceptance in your own journey. You have to actively work on it, and you have to make that decision for yourself. But when you do it, there's something beautiful that happens.
Yeah.
You still struggle. I am in no way saying Brittney and I are like struggle free. Hey,
No.
life is honky dory and fuck no. That's not what I'm saying. But there is something about this growth that there really is something beautiful about it. Like you really start to embrace things, and you start to live life again. And yes, it looks very different. And yes, there's still a lot of challenges, and life is still really, really freaking hard. But it is magical. I call it magical, and I'm going to stick to that. It's magical.
Yeah. No, and I 100% agree. I would say it filters everything. Like, living this life has filtered everything for me to where, like, my priorities are, like, nowhere near what they would be had I not, entered into this life of, having a child with disability. And I am able to, like, as stressful as it can be at times, I feel like I'm such a different person in terms of, like, the things I used to stress about, they don't bother me. And I almost feel like I'm, like, more of a carefree person, even though I have a lot more to be worried about.
It's so crazy. That's so true. Like, I kind of know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Like, it's like...
No, it's like this weird thing. Like, you can't really fully explain it, but you actually are more carefree despite having a shit ton more to care about.
Yeah, and not just like a shit ton more to care about, but like the pressure of all that more that you're caring about, right? Because it's like, it's literally sometimes like life is on the line, and that's what you have to care about. And I think that when you're being faced with that, suddenly, like, silly things like a sink full of dishes doesn't seem like a big deal.
Yeah, I always say that, like, I'm not the same person I was the day before Lino was born versus the day after Lino was born. And that's such a wild point in time to be able to actually decipher that and say, within like 24 hours, I was a completely different person. But it's really true. Like, that level of trauma is so hard to identify with if you haven't experienced it yourself. Unfortunately, there's just really no way to make somebody understand what that really does to somebody. But it also does this thing where it puts the things in this life and in this world that matter into perspective. And yes, it brutally puts them into perspective. And it's a shock to have those things put into perspective in that fashion. But there is, and I'm not a silver lining person, but there is a silver lining to it, because it does actually, it helps you really get rid of the bullshit out of your life, because there's just no room for bullshit.
Oh, yeah. The thing is that it is such a silver lining. I totally understand disability is tough to deal with. Making medical decisions for your child is like sometimes feels impossible, and like whether you're making the right decision. But I almost always like sit back and laugh, and I kind of say like, I wish everybody had a Cyrus.
I know.
Because, you know, like I wish everybody had a Cyrus. He has made all of our lives. And it's not just like me, my husband, his brother, you know, grandparents. I mean, like literally, like medical professionals, teachers. I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and be like, your child is literally like the greatest human being on this planet. I'm like,
but he is.
And there's something, and I agree. But there really is something like, he just has this way of just like kind of having people sit back and be like, oh, wow, life doesn't have to be as complicated as I make it, which is ironic because there are a lot of aspects of life that are much more complicated because of disability and accessibility and all that. But he just has this way of for everybody of just being like, it's a beautiful life. And so I do always sit back and I always say like, I wish everybody had a sight. Like, I wish everybody could have like just a week even of just being like, wow. Like, there are so many things I've stressed out about that I don't have to stress out about. Maybe everyone's life would be a little less stressful, but more stressful in different ways. I don't know.
I know, right?
But I do think that there's a lot to be said, like, with becoming a different person. I mean, that's something that Courtney and I are going to touch on in future episodes where, you know, we'll probably get more into our birth trauma and all that. But yeah, I mean, you are definitely a different person and I am definitely a different person. And it's like, I always say the old Brittney died in that labor and delivery room. And I'm a better person. And in some ways, I'm a worse person.
Yeah, there's always a dichotomy.
There is, yeah. But I do say, like, I love the version of Brittney now better than any previous Brittney version.
I love this Brittney version. I do too.
Thank you. And I love this Courtney version.
I know. I don't love the idea, or obviously not even just love the idea, but I don't like anybody liking the idea that a disabled child is teaching a lesson. Like our children taught us to be better, right? And that's not even what we're trying to say. It's actually the trauma that taught us to be better.
Yeah,
I honestly
it's the trauma.
Feel like
yes.
It's the traumatic event. It's the upheaval of your own world that actually teaches you to be a better person. I think the problem with society, or, you know, inspirational porn, all these sort of terms that get thrown around when disabled children are used in this fashion, is that people do mistakenly put it on the child, you know, and it's like, well, you know, my child taught me to be a better person.
I'm going to like 100% in agreement with you, because I think it's the trauma. Like you said, it's not Cyrus's disability that taught me any sort of lesson. It's literally the fact that I was so close to losing Cyrus. I mean, we were minutes away. I mean, he came out blue. We were literally minutes away of losing him. And it put everything into so much perspective. I'm just so thankful that he's here. And it's like, I'm so thankful for like his existence, and I'm so thankful for his brother's existence. And I know that You and I have talked about this before, where it's like everybody says when they're pregnant, like, oh, at least the baby's healthy. And it's like, that's not it. That's not, I mean, if you want to feel like that's it, okay, but that's not it. It's at least the baby's alive. Your baby can be born disabled, whether you know about it before the delivery, whether it happens at the delivery. I mean, thank goodness the baby's alive. That's what it is. It's not a healthy baby. It's a living baby. And that really, for me, going through that trauma of realizing how close we were to losing his existence, just that's what did it to me.
You know, I think toxic baby culture, which will definitely be another topic, which if you guys haven't really caught on yet, we're kind of dabbling a little bit in all the topics we'll eventually get into in full episodes. But that toxic baby culture of not really fully educating women and mothers, parents in general, about what could potentially go wrong. And it is exactly that. It's just toxic, you know, and it sets us up for failure and on so many levels, again, because it doesn't have to be a situation where it's just an event that happens at birth. It could be, you know, before, you know, in utero. It could be after. You know, there's just not enough talk about real life. I'm sorry, but it's not talked about enough. It's not, disability is not talked about enough, and how that may play into your life on any level, but particularly from what we're trying to talk about as a parent, that is not talked about enough at all.
I remember every, you know, visit them just being like, everything's great, looks great, you're gonna do so well during labor, like you're gonna do great, like, you know, just go into labor naturally, don't use Pitocin, try not to have an epidural, like, you know, just breathe through your contractions and do this, and you're gonna do great, everything's gonna be fine, you're healthy, baby's healthy. I mean, I even remember being told afterwards that I would have been the perfect home birth candidate because of how well everything went. And so when I was at every single visit hearing like, you're gonna do great, you're gonna do great, everything's gonna be fine, when everything wasn't fine, I pinned that onto me. And I sat back and I said, oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna do great, and now my baby's really, really sick. And not even hearing the reality that babies full term can be born sick, because I always just thought the NICU was for preemies. That's all you ever hear about. I ended up spiraling into such a deep depression, and I had so much PTSD, and I felt like I failed. And it's because nobody sits back, and we'll do it, but nobody sits back and nobody says, just because you have a healthy pregnancy does not guarantee you're going to have a healthy baby. But we will do everything that we can possibly try to do to make sure that your baby's born healthy. And if somebody just said to me, like, anything can go wrong, so expect it, but let's hope for the best, I would not have put all of that blame on myself. I mean, it was at least 3 months before I sought out a therapist where I was just riddled with guilt of feeling like my body failed me, the decisions I made failed me, like failed my baby.
Yeah.
It was constant, like, did I almost kill my baby? Like, if I just had the reality, and maybe it's a tough pill for people to swallow, but if you're a pregnant woman and you just hear like, hey, things might not be great, then you're gonna go in that NICU and you're not gonna feel as shocked, honestly.
I still have a really tumultuous relationship with my body from Leno's birth. Even the two of us choosing to have elective C-sections for our second born shows a lot. We don't actually have any medical reason to do that. That was all to literally try to stabilize our mental health. That was like, hey, what can I do to minimize the risk of taking a bigger hit than I can handle right now? Like that was literally, at least for, you know, I'm sure you probably agree, but that from my perspective, it was like, what can I do to have even if it's the smallest amount of control? what can I do to regain some sense of control? Because that was ripped right from me. That was ripped from me. And it really did feel, you know, that it was my body, my choices. It was me who did this. And this is something that the toxic baby culture, it silences people. You know, it almost does the reverse. You would think, well, maybe sometimes if you speak too much of what could go wrong, you could put fear into somebody. But I feel like by not doing that, you're actually doing the opposite. You're putting more fear, because they make it sound like all you have to do is just bake a baby in there, and then it just pops the F out. And I wish that was the fucking truth. But that is not the truth. And even if it's just as simple as like, and we definitely will dive deep in an episode, but even if it's just as simple as being like, hey, like these are the things we do, why we do them. We monitor with this monitor. We're going to do this to check the fetal heart rate. Why are we checking the fetal? Like there's a whole lack of like education from a medical perspective, especially and particularly just for anybody outside of the US. We are definitely talking about the US specifically.
Yes.
I'm sure this carries over to other countries. I'm sure we're not the only ones, but from a United States healthcare perspective, there's just they dropped the ball like 100% when it comes to actually fully supporting pregnant women and through that journey from beginning to very end. It's sad that we had to be as traumatized as we were when we were going to be traumatized no matter what. I think the system failed us, and then, you know, mom guilt, right? We throw that right back on us. It just becomes, well, it was me. You know, it was me who played a role.
And it's the isolation of it all too. And I mean, it's not even just the isolation of being in the NICU, right? I mean, like, I know we've talked about this before, where it's like you walk by the other NICU rooms and like all the babies are so tiny because there's, you know, preemies. And like, I know I mentioned to you, like the nurses were coming into our room and they're like, oh God, such a big baby. That's a big baby. And it felt like, okay, so why are we here? Why are we here then? And so there's that isolation. And then it's also like the approach of medical professionals. When Cyrus had an MRI close to after he, you know, like towards the end of the NICU stay, he had an MRI. And that's when we found out about the brain damage and stuff like that. And when it was told to us, it was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, your baby may never walk. And it was such like an end all feeling that I was like, oh my God. Where like, if somebody just approached me and was like, your baby may not walk, but that's okay. He's going to have a wheelchair and he's going to be amazing. And like, he's going to make you laugh every single day. I'm like, he may not talk, but guess what? We have technology now. And like, you can find a way. And even if there isn't technology for him, like, you're going to understand your child. Trust me. Like, your child will just look at you and you'll know what your child wants. Like, if somebody approached me in a way that it wasn't so like doom and gloom, then I think I would have been better off too. Because let me tell you what, like, it feels like doom and gloom when you get certain, you know, diagnosis of your child, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I'm telling you right now, like, Cyrus is disabled, but like, he is like the absolute, like, I mean, him and his brother are like the light of my life. You know, it's like Cyrus, and then the disability is just like, well, yeah, it's there, you know, and it's such a small aspect.
It is. And I think what we're really talking about even more than just that is that it is a cultural, societal issue, right? Because the only way you're really ever going to get a provider to talk to you in the way that you and I really would have loved to be spoken to about disability, about the prognosis of our children, even prior to their birth. If anybody had talked to me about like, hey, disability is just disability, like there are things out there, that level of provider that we're looking for, that's not going to happen until society. This is acceptance, right? This is inclusion. This is representation. This is This is the world starting to realize, like, hey, there is a huge chunk of the world's population that is disabled. There is a way. There is hope, right? And I think it's this lack of hope.
Yeah, and it's such a small, like, I'm constantly amazed by how much you guys and your family does. Like, you guys just went to Italy. And it's like, could you imagine if you were faced with the diagnosis and, like, instead of somebody being like, oh my God, your kid may never walk, they were like, you're going to take your kid, you're going to go to Italy, you're going to have this beautiful trip, and, like, it's going to be amazing, and, like, you're going to do these things with your kids and, like, travel. And I mean, yeah, like, your whole perspective.
But that's the thing, like, when you first hear a diagnosis, and it doesn't matter if it's a brain injury at birth, if it's something later on in their lives, but when you hear your child's diagnosis, it is so hard not to feel like you are now trapped in some sort of really fucked up hole.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, shit,
Yeah.
how am I crawling out of this? Like, the thing is that's, again, it's cultural. There is this problem when you already, before you even have to experience the inaccessibility of the world, you're already feeling the inaccessibility of the world, because you're like, well, how am I bringing my disabled child to do anything? Right? Because the majority of the world is just inaccessible. The whole paradigm needs to shift, because the only way you're going to get medical professionals to talk to people the way we're talking about it, and the way you and I want to actually be talked to in regards to it, Brittney, is if the whole world just stops this BS of, like,
I know.
like, this hiding it or tucking it away, or, you know, like, it's a deeper issue than it even seems.
It is.
You know, it's a deeper rooted issue than it seems on the surface, because there's so many aspects of it, and part of why we're trying to do podcasts is to talk about it. We want to talk about these things. We want to make you question things. We want to hopefully try to change some of your perspectives, but we're also realistic, and we understand we're not trying to change everybody and have everybody agree. Like, there's going to be topics we discuss that you're not going to agree with. There's going to be topics that offend you, or things that we say that offend you. We're also not trying to be offensive.
No.
But part of what we're trying to do here is openly talk about these things and actually personally learn and hopefully teach and educate others. You know, the only way this works is if we talk about it. And social media is one of those ways to do it, but social media is a double-edged sword. You know, it's like you get a lot of good out of it. Brittney and I wouldn't even know each other. We would not have connected. And we're talking about, like, after our child's injury, we were so isolated. Social media was that way for us to get out of isolation. We found support groups. We found other parents that are similar to us. You know, social media is also really dangerous, and it can go south really quickly. And you know, it'll be our next topic, our next episode will be talking a lot about the privacy and autonomy of disabled children on social media, particularly. But, you know, we're the gatekeepers, you know, for our children right now. Like, social media is going to be there. We can't get rid of social media. That's not going to happen. It's unrealistic. Let's stop with the people who bring that up as argument. Well, just don't do social media. Social media is now a part of our culture. Mm-hmm. It is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. How that looks and how advocacy looks on it, and how disabled children are actually, you know, presented on it, all of that falls into our hands. It truly does. And we have to be better people, and we have to be cautious, and we have to be aware of what we're putting out there and what we're exposing our children to. You know, we have to remember that they are going to be adults one day.
Yeah. And it affects them. It affects our kid, right? And I think that, you know, a big goal of this podcast too is to kind of help families navigate, particularly parents and caregivers, navigate, like, what your role is as a parent or a caregiver. I do think that there's, like, an entire progression of being a parent to a disabled kid, right? I mean, like, there's, like, kind of like the stage of oversharing, you know, and, like, a lot of that, like, I feel like is early on, and then you try to, you know, get your people, and then, like I just think it's really important for us as parents in every aspect, whether you have a disabled kid or you don't have a disabled kid, it is super important for us as parents to progress and to better ourselves and to kind of sit back and look at our mistakes, because parents are not perfect. And no matter how much we try to do for our kids, no matter how good we try to be, like, we can always be better. Not to, like, encourage that mom guilt. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, like, sometimes it takes some self-reflecting, right? And sometimes, like, it takes taking a step back and kind of sitting there and saying, like, am I doing certain things because I'm comfortable and we've survived this long? And how can I, instead of surviving, how can we all be thriving? And, like, it's really kind of crazy to say, but when I took a step back and I stopped oversharing and I stopped divulging, like, really personal bits of Cyrus's life, I became such a better advocate for him. And, like, I not only became a better advocate for him, but, like, I became what I would consider a better mother. And, like, internally, I just became happier with myself and more comfortable with myself and more comfortable in who I am as his mom. And it took a lot of stepping back and took a lot of self-reflecting and kind of, like, putting the pieces together of, like, what's my priorities. And I mean, it's been a 4-year journey, and I'm still on that journey, and I'm nowhere close to, like, where I want to be. But I do think, like, taking a step back, not just even in the social media world, but just, like, in real life, right? Like, talking to people and, like, all this, like, it's just helped me, be a better person.
I want to also say, like, we're also not trying to attack anybody. We're not trying to act like we're superior or that we're in some, like, headspace that is, like, beyond. We're, like, so good mentally, or, like, no, like, we're on the same journey. We did a lot of icky things. We've had a lot of icky posts that were like, hey, what the hell? Why would I do that? And maybe while you're listening to this, you're like, oh, that's where I want to be. Or maybe you're like, hey, I'm in the same page as you. Or maybe you've even surpassed us. Or, like, there's so many different perspectives that we're hoping will be listening to this podcast, because this journey is ever changing even for us. Like, we really are here to also better ourselves and better our relationships with disability, our relationships with our children, with our families, with our friends, like, the whole thing. You're literally going to be on the ride with us.
We're going to have different guests on. We will have other parents on. I'm really hoping to get some, like, medical professionals on. We're going to have disabled adults out on to voice, their side of things, because at the end of the day, I think it's really important for all caregivers, whether you are directly caregiving for somebody, like you have a child or a sibling or be it with disabilities, or, like, if you're a therapist or a doctor or anything like that, like, it's so important to listen to disabled voices from adults.
Yeah.
And there's, on the caregiving side of it, I don't feel like that's happening enough.
No, especially from a social media perspective, it's definitely lacking. But I also feel that in real life too.
Yeah.
I think there's really a huge opportunity there. We sometimes get so bogged down by our child's disability that I really do think, at least personally, I know I've done this. I do forget. I do forget sometimes that he is his own individual. He will be an adult and he will have his own life, right? I think sometimes we get so bogged down by the disability part that we're like, well, I'm going to be his caregiver for life, right? Yes. He's still, especially in listen, I get that there's different levels of disability, right? But in my personal experience, Lino has the cognition of a typical 4-year-old.
Yeah.
He is cognitively aware of everything. And sometimes even I don't give him enough credit, and I think these are all topics that we have to be able to own that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You said it before, Brittany, like we're parents, we're going to make mistakes. There are no perfect parents out there. I'm sorry. Nobody gives you a freaking rule book.
Nope.
Like you literally, they're like, here's a child, leave the hospital, peace out.
Have
Like,
fun.
and they even did that with a disabled child. They were like, here's your child. He can drink 30 ml out of a bottle. You're good. Bye. And I was like, what?
What am I
What
doing?
am I supposed to do now? Like there really is no way to do this perfectly. And I think what's so important is we have to be able to recognize it. And we're not going to always recognize it in the moment. We might recognize it too late in some cases. We might have to backtrack. We might have to apologize. We might have to do a lot of things. But it's really important that we're able to do it on some level.
Yeah.
Because yes, they're disabled, but that doesn't mean they're not a person.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that they're not entitled to everything. Privacy, autonomy, respect.
The whole thing.
All of it.
And I think these are the conversations we really need to talk about, and we really need to take a step back and look at from a different perspective, because we sometimes are trapped in this bubble. And it does nobody good. Absolutely no one.
It doesn't. And I will say, like, there is a massive lack of support for parents and caregivers and all that. And I get it. I don't want to fault anyone for throwing it out there and getting support. Because, I mean, nobody, it's like you said, nobody tells you what to do. We left the NICU and they're like, here you go. Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, I was barely this kid's mom. Like, I was watching everybody else take care of my kid while I just sat back and was like, what am I doing here? Like, I had no idea, and I still don't really know. I'm just winging it. We're all just winging it. And there's such, I so badly wish that there were, like, here's how to navigate the insurance system. Like, here's how you can guarantee that you're going to get your kid their piece of medical equipment. Like, I so badly wish that there was, like, just this handbook for all of these things, and there's not. And it's very, very scary when you're faced with the reality, like, your kid might not get the things that they need. How am I going to do this? Because this is now on me. So we're not faulting anyone for throwing it out there and oversharing. We're not. But
no, not at all.
Yeah, but we are saying it's, there are two sides of the story. There's your kid's side of the story and there's your side of the story. And your side of the story can be shared without sharing your kid's side. And I know that sounds really complicated, and we're going to get into that and we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
And I know that we've mentioned before that, we want to have a guest on who has a good social media following, and she does it in such a way that, and if we didn't know her personally, you and I wouldn't know anything about her kids' health information. I know you'd even said that verbatim. And it's very true. I would have no idea about the health status of her kids. And she just does it really right. And I think that there's a really right way that you can do it where you're still sharing your side, because nobody wants to silence the parents or the caregivers.
Yeah.
And you can share your side and you can still respect your kids' medical information.
There are ways to do it, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about this, and we're really going to do a deep dive into this on our next episode. And I think we'll come up with hopefully some good insights. And I'm hoping also in this journey, even you and I learn some things, because, it's really about just educating and getting it out there. So I'm super excited for our next episode. Well, to be fair, the next episode is going to start the topic in regards to privacy and autonomy on social media. It's actually going to carry over to a couple episodes and a few different guests. It'll be a special treat for you guys. We're going to get a bunch of different angles on this. We're just super excited to get started here.
Yeah, and we're really excited to have everyone along on the journey with us. If you are a listener and you have some topics that you want us to discuss and touch on, please be sure to reach out and let us know. If anyone thinks that, they would be a great guest on here, we're always open to hearing from others who may want to be a guest on the podcast. So you can follow us. We're on Instagram at Bitching and Bolusing. You can always reach out to us there and keep an eye out for future episodes. We will be posting bi-weekly, and we will let everybody know on social media when our next episode's ready to launch.
Yeah, and we'll throw our Instagram handles up with this episode, but I've been so grateful, and I'm going to tell my little story about Brittney's Instagram handle, because it's really a funny journey. She's actually Little Thug Muffin, like Lil Thug Muffin. But for the longest damn time, I could have sworn it was Little T Hug Muffin.
And I've heard that before.
But it's not, guys, okay? So don't listen to me.
It is if you want it to be. That's okay.
We'll obviously be posting on our personal pages as well, but it'll get out there and it'll do its rounds, so feel free to reach out. We definitely want to hear your suggestions, your ideas. We want your feedback too. Listen, we are busy mamas. We're not going to be able to answer everybody. Don't come at me with that expectation.
Yeah, no.
Just walk out the door right now.
I can barely pee. So, I think I, wake up and I go until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, I have not peed yet. So, I'm certainly not scouring all of my messages.
No, but know that we are looking at everything. We are sifting through it. We always take a peek. I'm always there. I do read, even on my personal page, I read everybody's messages. Yeah. I do. My lack of response is not because I don't have a response for you. It's honestly just because this life is very overwhelming. So
we have anxiety.
Just bear with us.
We are just anxious.
Seriously, some serious anxiety. But yeah, guys, I mean, listen, we're putting this episode out. The hope is every couple of weeks, so every 2 weeks we'll be popping up at an episode for you. So just stay tuned.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for listening to the Bitching and Bolusing podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Bitching and Bolusing, and like and subscribe for future episodes.